Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Studio. And I am super excited to have Trevor Love on today. If you follow any of our social media, especially our YouTube, Trevor and I have been chatting back and forth about many different health and wellness type subjects, and expect to see a lot more of the videos with him and I. We've done a lot of short little videos on health and wellness. He is a health and wellness personal trainer coach. He has been for years. He walks the walk, talks the talk. And today we're going to be talking about how everyone is a performer and how we should all eat like that. So there's many parallels between patients and athletes, and why we're really all athletes and should treat ourselves like athletes. So, Trevor, without further ado, welcome to our show.
Hi, Shawn. Hi, Janet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about your background, Trevor.
Yeah. Oddly enough, what I've been working on the last couple of years is very different than what I thought I would have been doing for my life. So the first 10 years of my career was all traditional strength conditioning coaching. So my undergraduate and graduate degree were in exercise science, kinesiology. I did the entire strength coach grind, the internships, the graduate school studies, the moving state by state every year. And I've coached high school, college. I worked at San Jose State, worked for the 49ers. We moved to Texas, where we actually undertook an esports performance program where we looked more into cognitive training. And that was pretty unique. And that's what really opened up my mind to this other world of performance, which was kind of what led into medical nutrition and integrative medicine and how to optimize the human body similarly as athletes do, but just for all of us, everyday Joe Schmoes who are trying to live a long, healthy life
Right.
and excel at what we do. And so, yeah, I've been in the health industry for a long time, but whether it's working with young athletes, professional athletes, or with clinicians, it's always been a passion of mine. And I'm always trying to just learn and stay on the cutting edge of ways to help each other and share that information.
Awesome. So, Janet, what kind of questions do you have for Trevor?
Okay, Trevor. So I got to know how you ended up with orthomolecular.
Yeah. So there's a disconnect, right? And you both know this, but between what is marketed to athletes and what, I mean, you have the dripping sweat of Gatorade off of the basketball play and what is perceived to be used in that setting and what is actually used in that setting. And so one example I'd give you is when I was working with the 49ers, there's Gatorade vending machines, and then there's, Cytosports products, and there's a lot of these outward facing brands, and they're decent, sports brands. But I think when you dig deeper into the performance staff and what we're doing with athletes is you see this integration of a lot of medical grade nutrition. And so what I kind of piqued my interest was when I saw the top performers in the world actually using medical grade nutrition. And when I started to try to leverage the clinicians I worked with to give those nutrients to college football players, that's when I started to expose my athletes, my knowledge base, my relationships to that other world. And that's when I developed relationships with other brands in the industry, was by utilizing our physical therapists and chiropractors to give combine athletes or to give college football players medical grade vitamin D, fish oils, vitamin C, magnesium, as opposed to only focusing on macronutrients and protein and post-workout nutrition, which everyone does. We kind of miss the boat on optimizing cell function if we're just delivering whey protein every day. So that's what exposed me to it. And then eventually I didn't want to move every year. And
that's
I wanted stability and lifestyle for my family. And the coaching grind is like, I guess it could be similar to shipping off for 3 months in the military in regard to your schedule. So I have a lot of respect for them, but it's a lot more family friendly to work in this industry.
Yeah, for sure. I'll bet. I bet it was kind of exciting when you were younger to maybe do some of that stuff, but definitely as you're trying to settle down with a family, it would be a lot tougher.
Right. Right, right. But I am very thankful for everything I learned. And that's ultimately the answer to Janet's question, which is I mean, capitalism is good and bad, right? Capitalism is what drives people to excel and win, and at the highest level. And so the things you learn, there's the most pressure on those professionals to
Yeah.
form a lot of those things parallel, the things that we're trying to do with clinicians and patients now. And so that's what's accelerating a lot of the medical industry, is just that drive to help people get better and heal.
So tell us about the parallels between patients and athletes.
Yeah. So the one there's a couple frameworks that we have learned on the medical side and that we talk about daily, and then I think back and I'm like, this is identical to either what we did with athletes or what should have been done. But there's two terms that Tom Goyams, the PhD who writes a lot of medical information and education for our clinicians, he developed every single first chapter of his book talks about two terms, and he's got about 6 or 7 roadmaps, and this first chapter is the same. It talks about physiological resilience and metabolic reserve, and at the cellular level, that has really come to become like, this is a topic that is just so important. And so we think about physiological resilience as the ability just for your body to absorb stress, maintain homeostasis, and come right back to where we were, right? And if we all had resilience physiologically at our cell levels, there would be no disease, right? Because your blood pressure would go up and then would come right back down, and your insulin would go up and come right back down, and your adrenaline would go up, but then it would reset, and cancer cells would stress you, but then you'd kill them and you'd come right. So the problem is that we are becoming less and less resilient, and therefore the stressor is winning, and that manifests in disease state. And then there's metabolic reserve, which is the long-term capacity of our body to fight those stressors to return us back to physiological resilience. So those two terms I have found is the root of every conversation when it comes to a patient that's working on something, a performer that's working on something, or optimizing our longevity is, are you physically resilient at the cellular level? And if not, why? And then what does your metabolic reserve look like? And that's a gas tank. That's a reserve tank. That is our, I think of our oil and gas reserves. It's just waiting for us to tap them, but the point is, if you don't have the nutrients, if you don't have the omega-3 fatty acids, if you don't have the antioxidants to prevent oxidation of cells, if you don't have the foods that support the microbiome, then you have no metabolic reserve. Therefore, if you don't have the sleep, if you don't have the exercise, therefore, when the stressor comes, for one individual who is extremely robust in their gas tank, they shake it off, right? One bad night of sleep, they shake it off. But that other person who has no metabolic reserve because all the other factors aren't there, has one bad night of sleep, and all of a sudden we see it trigger something, and it leads down this vicious spiral. And so those are the two parallels, at least from the terminology perspective, that I think if I were to go back, or if I looked at everything we did, ultimately we were just trying to build metabolic reserve so that our athletes were physiologically resilient.
Yeah, so they could train harder.
Right.
So they could get an adaptive response.
Right.
But in order to be able to do that, they've got to get the proper rest and proper nutrition,
right,
and have that reserve, or they'll actually get weaker.
Right. And that is a whole other can of worms that is exactly where the next parallel was, which is the central nervous system and the 4 key stressors. So, I know Jim Laval has been a huge part of the education in the pharmacy world, and his involvement as a integrative pharmacist in the professional athlete world is huge. But he was very impactful on me in understanding that if someone's deficient in their training and you want to super compensate to build muscle, build mass, get ready for the season, right? But if their central nervous system is in a state of fight or flight and it's stressed, the central nervous system is not going to build muscle. It's not going to trigger hormone response. It's going to trigger stress response. And so the other, I would say, parallel I've noticed is the 4 key stressors, which I have here. But this illustrates, these are all the 4 key stressors on the brain, which is inflammation, blood sugar, sleep or circadian rhythm, and mental emotional stress. Those 4 stressors impact the brain the same way. And so in thinking back, like what a fool we were to believe that our athletes were getting stronger and faster while they weren't sleeping, they were drinking all night. And it's just clueless, right? But how does that parallel, to us today as just being human beings who want to perform well, who in their daily lives, and we're all seeing clinicians as patients, or you as our clinicians, which is, if you think that you're going to maintain a healthy mental state, right, with good neurotransmitters, and if you think that you're going to maintain a healthy hormone state with great hormone production, you're insane if you're not managing inflammation, blood sugar, circadian rhythm, and mental emotional stress. And I know bioidentical hormones have done a phenomenal job of bridging the gap and accelerating medicine forward. But people have to remember why they got there, right? Why did you arrive at estrogen challenges, testosterone challenges, progesterone challenges, and what is the root cause of that? And the root cause of that is the 4 key stressors. And so I can't say how much I have learned in this category, which is like, what do you have for hair loss? What do you have for testosterone production? What do you have? The answer to all these things is the root is the 4 key stressors. I have ways to limit inflammation and blood sugar dysregulation and improve your sleep and manage adaptogens for mental emotional stress. And if people can understand that the HPA axis and your central nervous system are connected as one, and the 4 key stressors tax those, then you can start to work backwards on, okay, well then how do I optimize my hormones? And it's a long conversation, but like I think back on how much focus is on anabolic function for athletes. And the answer to all of that was like, well, you need a detox. You need to manage your blood sugar. You need to sleep, and you need to stop mentally being so dysfunctional and practice some stress and relaxation techniques, and all of a sudden your hormones will start to balance. So yeah, that's complex, but looking back, that's probably what I would have focused on more, would be managing hormones to the 4 key stressors.
Well, I think those 4 key stressors have caused a lot of issues with health in patient population. I can't speak to the athlete necessarily because I wasn't as intimate with them as you were working with them in general. But, when I think about what's happened with patients over the last 20 years, I mean, testosterone levels in men have plummeted.
Right.
I mean, we used to never, never is a strong word, but,
Yeah.
usually rarely see a low testosterone in somebody in their 20s.
Right.
And now
Right.
we see it
More common.
regularly.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it really touches and highlights in my brain the term prevention on our side. And really, before you get to a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a PA or even to us, you really want to prevent disease because, when you show up and you already have something on board, there's a whole gamut of that inflammation that's already started and all this other stuff. So we do have to work backwards, but starting early and young is really where it's at. I mean, it's hard
Yeah.
to maybe convince people in their teenage and 20 years, but that's where it's at, I believe, because I think some of the population that we see that has aged well over time, that have lived into their 90s and hundreds, they obviously lived a life that had a good reserve and
Right.
were able to handle, because they went through a lot of stressors in their life, but they handled it really well.
Yeah.
So prevention, I think, is where I like to speak a lot. But Shawn and I work with people, of course, at many different levels, and so do
Yeah.
you.
Right. I often hear your body does not care about your hormones when there's a tiger chasing you.
No.
And I think back like on that triage theory, which is your body will prevent death at the risk of losing long-term function, right? It'll the emergency receives all the attention. And so what people need to understand is the emergencies are every single day little drips of inflammation and blood sugar changes and all these things. Over time, your body says, why would I care about fertility? Why would I care about testosterone? Why would I care about brain function? I'm trying to keep you alive, and your blood sugar is on a roller coaster that's going to kill you. So I'm just going to divert all nutrients away from my metabolic reserve to your insulin pathway. And so that's something that I think is hard to wrap your mind around. But once people do this whole triage concept, they understand, look, if I don't take care of these 4 stressors, nothing really else
Right.
matters. It's kind of over after that because your body's living in, you know, it's like a short-term mindset, you know, for the rest of your life. And if you can manage those, that's anti-aging, right? Like people, what do you have for anti-aging? It's like, well, you sure you want the answer to that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. No, that's so true. And I think in our culture, we push, at least in certain parts of our culture, that, we always want to be that A-type personality that's, on the go. Or if we are on the go, we, mismanage our, diet and sleep and all that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very, very important because that is something that Shawn and I do counsel our clients with, is that this is a piece of the puzzle. And if you
Mm.
don't fix that cortisol level or that those stressors, you're right. It's not, I mean, we can put a little band-aid there, but if you don't fix it, it's
Yeah.
not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Our body was not meant to be constantly chased by a
No.
tiger, so to speak, with your analogy.
Right.
So if you have crappy diet, crappy sleep, and stress, mental or physical,
Right.
every day, day in and day out, and you're not getting the proper nutrition and rest, I mean, it is going to age you a lot faster, and your body's just not meant to compensate for those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about people that have bigger challenges with viruses and that term high risk category, right? That's really just going back to what we're talking about. It's just metabolic resilience. And so if your body has a lot of toxins in it, for example, right? And toxins can kill you. And so your
Right.
liver's always dealing with these toxins. Let's package them, let's put them in the fat, let's detoxify. Do you think, our body cares about our gut health at that point? Like that tiger is about to kill you.
Just keep you
No,
alive, right?
yeah.
So all of a sudden you have IBS or, diarrhea or constipation. It's like, what's going on? And you could try a bunch of things, but really the root of that is you haven't let your body rest and digest. And yeah, I think this is probably the most abstract portion of all of integrative medicine, in my opinion, is hormone health as it pertains to HPA axis dysfunction and the 4 key stressors. It seems like there's a ton of growth to be had in that category in the future because it's just so, cardio is very straightforward, at least for the labs. GI testing is becoming more straightforward for the labs, but hormone health, I mean, I can't even speak to it, how complicated it is. I'm sure you could, but it just seems like we have a long way to go.
Well, and I think we are getting better, like we are in many areas of medicine. But I don't know if overall, generally, it's making our population healthier. And I
Mhm.
think part of it is because our population is being chased by a tiger constantly. Now, let's face it, we all have stressors in our life. I mean,
Right.
you know, you do, we do, but it's how we handle those stressors and how we respond to them is what's
Yeah.
important. Not everything has to be a tiger. I mean, we might
Right.
think it is, but not everything is a tiger.
Mhm.
So it's how we respond, and the important thing is still, the most important thing is still sleep appropriately. That's probably
Mhm.
the most important thing to
Yeah.
help us recover from being chased by the tiger.
Right. Right. I heard Carrie Jones the other day, the hormone expert, talk about are you genuinely playing, even as an adult? Are you laughing and loving and genuinely playing every single day? Because a lot of the community-based component of mental emotional health is that component right there, which is like, even though it looks different as an adult to a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 12-year-old, is like, do you have someone that makes you laugh hard every day? Do you play every day in your own way? And are you getting that community component? Because I think of the conversations we've had, Shawn, where it's why are the populations that are centenarians, right? The blue zones, Southern Italy, Loma Linda, are these like the gym goers? No, it's like
Yeah.
how many people live in the gym that are in the blue zones? Very few. It's because they have some form of healthy diets, a lot of movements, right? They may move in different ways. It's not a 1-hour workout of weight training, but they're always moving, and they have community, right? They're very
Right.
big on laughing and loving and
Yeah,
entertaining,
right.
big
Yeah.
communities. And that's interesting, to see how that affects people's hormones and longevity and stress. And
I have to speak to that because it just came to me too. Like what you're speaking of is like in the culture I came from, my parents farmed and ranched, and 10 o'clock, that was the time that people showed up, and they were on your door. They had their coffee and their little treat and talked and hashed out whatever was on the news or politics or religion, whether you liked each other's view or not.
Yeah.
Picked up and left, and off to work they went. But it was a daily occurrence where people stopped in and saw one another and just got like, hello, how are you doing? That kind of thing. And we are so far away from that. So far away in many cultures. I'm not saying every, but in many cultures. I mean, it's kind of sad to see, but I think that's a very generational thing, because I know that many people would be very offended if you just dropped in. I mean, that in itself would be like, this person didn't call, they just stopped over. And I mean, we came from, I think, times where people were a lot more connected, whether you were miles apart or whatever, but you still had those connections. And those short conversations, I'm sure, made a huge difference in just relaxation, our cortisol. I mean, because part of having relationships, I think, does affect a lot of those neurotransmitters in our brain. And I mean, if anything taught us in the last 2 years, staying in your corner in your house and not going anywhere was not a good thing for humans.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, we need the connection.
Definitely. And I know that was maybe a little off topic, but
it all goes together.
Right. That whole mental emotional component of medicine is hard to measure. And that's the only way to really measure it, is if you're taking action in your life in the process, and then you can follow up and see how that process has changed with someone's actual hormone levels of stress hormones.
Right.
But we know that cortisol is a dominator. It's the fight or flight. It's the stressor. It's like, hey, if you're living in that's tiger stage, your cortisol is going to stay high, and that's the enemy. High cortisol long term is the enemy of all those anabolic hormones that you guys do an exceptional job with managing, and that we do everything in our power to limit this mismanagement of it in a patient's life, in regard to just letting the stressors destroy their anabolic hormones. So
yeah, I mean, cortisol is catabolic. It makes us weaker, literally, over the long term, because it's for short term fight or flight. I mean, obviously we need a little bit of it all the time, or we would die.
Yeah.
But that's why HPA axis function is so important, because literally, if we don't have that healthy relationship with those, we will die.
Right.
And our fight or flight, our cortisol, it trumps them all. If you have bad thyroid, if you have bad testosterone, you can live without that.
Yeah.
But without cortisol, you can't live.
Right.
I mean, so it's very important to fix those issues first. I mean, or you won't work to optimal health. So,
well, you won't heal.
Yeah, you won't heal.
Right?
Yeah, because really, if you think about it, every day, whether it's internally or externally, our body has to repair something.
Right.
So the healing process does not happen if you're always running.
Right.
It just isn't. So the body has no chance to switch that little lever while we sleep and just kind of go into the mode of, hey, I'm going to take care of that tissue and take care of it. I mean, think of how quickly babies' skin heals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unreal. They can have scratching before you know it's gone. It's just like, what happened?
Yeah. I know personally, I'm embarrassed to say my son, we had no emergencies until he's now 5. He tried to lick the condensation off metal during the first freeze here.
Of course.
He's a boy.
Got stuck. So he's been healing, but it's amazing. That was 10 days ago. And it's like every day, 2 inches better, 2 inches better.
Yeah, right. I
know. But yes, definitely. Strong.
So Trevor, working with elite athletes, was there, and how we can make a parallel to patients.
Right.
So working with elite athletes, was there one thing that you could tell them if they weren't performing optimally and they were doing most everything right? What was the most common thing that you could tell them that they need to do better?
Ooh, good question.
And that's a broad question.
Yeah,
'cause
this is
everybody's
going to be
different.
a little long-winded, but this was the this was the framework for how we measured someone as an athlete, and I think this applies to every human being, including every patient. So this is maybe like a napkin type drawing, and I'm going to explain this, but essentially it's only really 5 letters, and this is something that everyone can understand, and this is how you can use a framework to develop someone. And basically you have 2 P's on top, 2 T's on bottom, and health in the middle of H. And so this is a pie chart. And James Smith, PhD, sports scientist, Fergus Connolly, sports scientist, they're both kind of the ones who influenced my taking of this concept and trying to apply this. And it's extremely difficult to apply it to a team, but individually it's very easy. And so this is what it is. If you measure someone's success in any activity, and let's just say for the sake of this conversation, a patient, the activity is optimizing your health forever, and the athlete is winning. You have a couple variables that can be measured for your success. So you have the 2 P's, which would be physical, psychological, and then the T's would be technical and tactical. And in the middle is your health. And so as we evaluate a human being or we evaluate an athlete, it's really the same framework as physically. How exceptional are you at the variables required to be good at that sport? So if it's, a football player, it's going to be it's the combine, right? Those are the physical variables measured. Whether you can debate that all day, but my point is there's always going to be some variables to measure. For someone like in the clinical setting, it's their labs, right? Physically, are you changing your labs and optimizing your labs? And then psychologically, that's obviously your personality, your emotional IQ. How successful are you psychologically with perceiving stress and executing tasks? Technically, it's how you actually execute the choices you make on the strategy. It's not the strategy, but the actual execution of whatever task that may be for an athlete. So it could be footwork or handwork or placement of their body. And then lastly, tactically, right? How do you go about that exercise? What's your strategy? And at the core root of all of that, which we always told our players, is health, because none of those things matter if you're not healthy. You're sitting on the bench, or you're with the athletic trainer, or you're getting a surgery and you're done for the season. And so the goal of that pie chart is to expand everything outward so the pie gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the best athletes in the world obviously have the largest pie chart, right? And so those are the Kobe's and for basketball, it's like LeBron's and Michael Jordan, which is they have figured out a way to be technically sound, tactically sound, physically sound, psychologically sound, and maintain their health. And if you evaluate every single person to that, you're going to find weak links in the chain. There may be athletes that are physically unbelievably gifted and extremely weak psychologically, right? Okay. And the same thing applies for us as we try to optimize our health is how are we doing physically? How are we doing psychologically? What's our technique of our day or our strategy of our day or how to optimize my relationships? And at the root of who I am personally as a man or a father or an employee is my health, because none of the other stuff matters if I'm not healthy.
Right.
And so that's kind of the framework that we work people through, because then it's measurable. Okay. You believe that you're not tough, right? Or you're not resilient, or you don't like waking up in the morning, or you don't like going to bed early, whatever. Okay, well, here's some tasks. Here's some process goals to accomplish so that your pie chart can improve psychologically, so that you're no longer a liability on the psychological side and an extreme asset on the physical side. If you want to be great, it's the old, physical and mental combination. So you can set goals within each category to say, hey, you know what? Physically, I'm doing great. Psychologically, I'm doing great, but I just don't have a strategy. I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, where I'm going with it, what I'm doing with my job. Let's develop a strategy. That would be tactic. So that's the framework we try to apply to evaluating athletes. And then we evaluate the process of how to improve them. And at the root of that is health, which comes down to everything we do every day in medicine. And that has subcategories. But that would be how I would say, let's, develop you and let's get better and let's evaluate how we're doing.
Yeah, that would pretty much work for anybody. So physical, psychological,
yep,
and then tactics and technical, and
yep,
everything in the middle is health. And I tell people this all the time. whether you're an athlete or whether you're a patient or just a typical person like me, without health, we've got nothing. I mean, if we don't have good health, it's, we can't live life. We can't enjoy life. Doesn't matter how much money we have. If you don't have good health, you can't enjoy it.
Right.
So without health, it's nothing. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And obviously, Warren Buffett, whether you agree or not, or a fan of Warren or not, I always thought his quote on, if you had one car for the rest of your life, and that was the only car you got, and you were 18 and you got it and you're stuck with it forever, he's like, how would you treat that? How would you treat that car? And I think he is, and then he goes on to say, that's your body, right? And somehow, he sells and chocolate, and also stops at McDonald's every morning. So it's one thing to say and do it. The point is he's right, which is there comes a point where preventative medicine is less costly than emergency medicine. And I know it's a hard pill to swallow, I guess, pun intended, to pay for these things, but you have to, unfortunately, we have to get hit in the face in your 30s to realize, or 40s, maybe even 20s, how important it is to take care of that car, because you only have one for the rest of your life.
Well, as Janet often says, you either pay now or pay later.
Amen.
And that's just true. And I want to be healthy the rest of my life. I don't want to be a decline in health and not being able to enjoy my middle-aged years and beyond. So
yeah.
So Trevor, as we wrap this podcast up, tell us what you have a passion for.
Professionally or personally?
Both.
Well, professionally, I frankly want to impact as many lives as possible in a positive way. I'm a believer, and I'm a Christian, and I believe in the Lord, and I feel like my vocation in life is to impact people in a positive way. And I believe that integrative and functional medicine, there's no better cause, because you're saving a lot of people's lives, you're enhancing the quality of people's lives. And I feel like, every day I go to work, I have a purpose for why I'm going to work today. And that is to help spread good information that can enhance the quality of people's lives. Personally, father of two, and I enjoy I enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy hunting. And I like I said earlier, we talked about what moves you, right? These, I like to exercise by being outdoors, and I think that's a huge passion. And I love, being around my family and watching my boys grow up. And I think life's too short, as we mentioned, to not take care of your body, but also to have relationships and serve your family and value that. So that's been my focus. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if anybody has any questions for you, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Trevor?
They can, good question. They can email me at t.love@ompimail.com. And I'm happy to help. Obviously I'm passionate about this industry and these topics. And I think, just please reach out if you have questions, and happy to help.
All right. I thank you so much, Trevor. It's been a pleasure having you on. And our goal of this podcast, as always, is to educate and empower. There's your email right there. Is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. And I think you helped us realize that goal. So thank you so much for doing that. I really, really appreciate it. Thursday, tune in to our midweek podcast at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Hunter Schultz, he will be on our podcast again. I think it's his third time. We're going to be talking about patient privacy, so you don't want to miss out about that. So thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you.